On today's show, we're going to hear from Cavs head coach Kenny Atkinson and team president of basketball operations Koby Altman on Friday. I've got three big questions for those guys as it pertains to the season. I'll tell you what they are next on today's Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Magazine, and a number of other stops along the way. Thank you for making today's episode of Locked On Cavs your first listen today, and thank you for making the show your first listen every day. You can check us out anywhere you get your podcast. Cavs season is here. We've got a media day today. If you're listening to this on Friday, this is up on YouTube a little bit earlier, so maybe Thursday night you're checking this out. In that case, the first of two media days for the Cavs is tomorrow, but make sure you are subscribed to the podcast anywhere you get your podcast. Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave some nice words in a review as well. Also, make sure you're checking us out on YouTube. Just search Locked On Cavs on YouTube. Hit that thumbs up button and hit the subscribe button and notification bell so you're getting the latest Locked On Cavs content as soon as it is available to you. A proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show, of course, is brought to you by FanDuel, and you can start off the NFL season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So Friday morning, Koby Altman, the Cavs president of basketball operations, and Kenny Atkinson, the Cavs head coach who was hired earlier this summer, they will meet with the media for the first of two media days that the Cavs are having. Friday will be those two. Monday will be various players. I don't believe as of now the players have been announced who will be available. My guess is we'll see, a number of the big names like Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen, Darius Garland, but I don't know that for sure, but that would be what my anticipation is. But as far as Friday's media day goes, that's where I want to start. Because it's something I'm very interested in. With players, you'll hear things about how the summer went, what they're looking for to improve their game. But with how, in particularly Koby Altman, because he's not made available for on-the-record comments all that often. Kenny Atkinson obviously will speak well over 100 times on the record to the media during the season. So I'm not necessarily as interested in that because we're going to get to know Kenny Atkinson, I think, pretty well over the next couple of months. So I've put together, and I will be in attendance Friday. So I, will, or someone else will have the chance to ask these questions too. But I've put together a list of 3 questions that I'm very interested to hear. And these are pretty specific, I think, to Koby Altman. Question number 1 that I am most interested in getting the answer from on Friday's media day is, what did you see last year from this team, from this roster, that made you feel comfortable in not adding much from the outside to it and feeling that there can be internal growth, development, that they can take the next step without much in terms of addition from the outside? So to recap, the additions from the outside this summer, Jalen Tyson, who the team drafted number 20 overall out of Cal. We don't know what he's going to be, a bit of an unknown. He's the only guy that's on a standard NBA contract that is new to the team from last year. Luke Travers is on a 2-way. He's new to the team. And JT Thor, also on a 2-way. He's new to the team. So why is it, I genuinely want to know, and I'm not saying that this is a right or wrong thing. It might not be the way I would have approached the offseason, but until we see the actual results of it, I don't say you can say that it's right or wrong. But what about last year? What about the experience this core has together made it so that the Cavs front office felt comfortable bringing everybody back? They signed Donovan Mitchell to an extension with, if he was willing to sign an extension, that was a no-brainer. They signed Evan Mobley to a max contract extension that does have escalators that could rise above what it is projected to be at should he make an All-NBA team this year. And they signed Jarrett Allen to what I think is a very team-friendly contract extension. And I think if you look at all 3 of those moves in vacuums, all 3 of them are moves that make sense. But I also do wonder if all three of them combined, particularly the Evan extension and the Jarrett extension, if you combine that, do they make as much sense together as they do separately? I think that there's a good reason as to why those things were all done. I do think it makes sense, but I want to hear the explanation. I want to hear why the Cavs, after losing in 5 games in the second round, think that they didn't need to make changes. Maybe there's a great reason for it. Maybe it's just, hey, we need to see where this core can go. We want to give this one more crack at it. I think that's a fair thing. I also think, you have to see the forest through the trees a little bit, and that there is a bit of an off-ramp here with when Jarrett Allen signed that contract extension. That is something that is worth bringing up. It's worth mentioning. I think when you talk about his contract extension, the date in which he signed it, it's important when he signed it, because he is trade eligible for 4 days. I believe it'll start February 2nd or February 3rd through the trade deadline, which is February 6th or 7th. I don't remember the exact dates off the top of my mind right now, but that is an important thing. So what was it about last season? Was it the fact that they did advance in the postseason? Was it the fact that this was a team that really didn't get the opportunity to see what they could be at full strength? Because for the most part, they weren't at full strength all year. They never found a rhythm as a full team working together the way that it was envisioned, so it was sort of a lost year. I want to know the explanation. And again, I'm not saying that this was the wrong thing to do. I just want to know why it is that the Cavs didn't feel as if they needed to go out and make outside additions. That is the question. That is the number one question that I have for Koby Altman on Friday. I would love to hear that answer. It's a question I plan on asking if no one else asks it before me, but that is something that I'm very interested in seeing. Again, I don't think that there's a right or wrong answer. I genuinely want to know what it is. Question number 2 I have for Koby Altman on Friday. What area do you think Evan Mobley can take the biggest leap in? Because this team has invested a lot in Evan Mobley. Obviously, that contract extension I just mentioned for Evan is a really big deal. He's going to be one of the highest paid players on this team. And now that won't take effect this year. That goes into effect next season. But that to me shows a very strong belief in Evan Mobley, that a leap for him, particularly on the offensive end, because I'm not sure that there's another leap coming defensively. Like, he's really, really good. I just don't know how much better he can get on that end, but I do think he can get a lot better offensively. So what area offensively does Koby Altman envision Evan Mobley improving the most? Is it that they think he can become a much better three-point shooter, to where he shot right around 37% last year, but it was on a very low volume? Do they believe that volume can be increased to where he can still be a 37-38% three-point shooter, but on 4 or 5 three-point attempts per game? Do they believe that he should be facilitated more, or used more, I should say, as a facilitator, where he's helping to playmake for others, where he's taking some of the playmaking pressure off of Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell and the 2 ball-dominant guards that the Cavs have? Is that the answer? Or is it just, hey, what he's doing right now offensively, where he is an efficient player, he is not a high-usage player, but what he's doing on that end is good. They don't need more. Maybe that is the answer. I don't think that would be the right answer, but maybe that is the answer. That's a question I have for this front office. It's a question I have about this team. I genuinely want to know, where do they think that leap is coming from? I think that leap needs to happen. I think Evan has it within him to take that leap. I think he still has superstar potential. Just because he hasn't reached it offensively yet doesn't mean that I've stopped believing it's there. I still think he's got it within him to get there. But what area specifically do they think Evan Mobley is going to take the next step? Where's his next progression on the offensive side of the floor going? And maybe that is a good question for Kenny Atkinson too. Obviously, with him being the coach and being a guy who has had a ton of success in his coaching career developing players, particularly transforming the careers of some big men. Now, I don't know that they were the same skill set as Evan Mobley, but he does have success in that area. So that's a good question, I think, for both Koby and for Kenny at Friday's Media Day. Question number 3 that I really, really want the answer to. I will tell you about it because I think this is the biggest question, and I think that this is the question that is going to shape how we view this Cavs season. I'll tell you what it is next on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. This NFL season, FanDuel should be the place you're going. Why should FanDuel be the place you're going? Well, that's, of course, because FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of an NFL game that you're watching, whether it's the Browns this weekend in Vegas taking on the Raiders, maybe it was a Thursday night game last night. Maybe you got a hunch in the second quarter, said, I think this is going to happen. So you can go to FanDuel, make a live bet, and while you're there, you can check out the latest play-by-play. You can check out live stats. You can get everything you need on the same page where you place your bets. Plus, right now with FanDuel, you will get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That is $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Like I said, the Browns on the road this weekend in Vegas, taking on the Raiders. They opened up as a road favorite. They're now a road underdog. As someone who watches the Browns, I wouldn't feel great about them this week on the road. Maybe you feel differently than me, but if you bet $5 and you're a new customer to FanDuel, you will get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Even if that bet doesn't hit, that still sounds like a win to me. So head on over to FanDuel. It is America's #1 sportsbook. Go to FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said earlier, Media Day #1 for the Cleveland Cavaliers is Friday. I'm hoping to have a post-Media Day, post-Kenny Atkinson, Koby Altman press conference episode of Locked On Cavs. So watch the feed, watch YouTube to check that out. Also, Monday will be the big Media Day. Everyone will be available. Well, I don't know that everyone will be available, but it will be the big player Media Day at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. I will be there before heading down to Florida for training camp that begins Tuesday at IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida. Very excited for that. Cannot wait to get started with some actual basketball to talk about. Very, very excited. But question number 3 that I have for Kenny Atkinson and Koby Altman. What is a successful season for the 2024-2025 Cleveland Cavaliers? Is a successful season for the Cavs winning 50-plus games and getting to the second round of the playoffs again? Or is that something that wouldn't be viewed as a success? I think right now, for this organization, they should be hungry for more than they achieved last year. Now, the regular season record isn't something I'm overly concerned about. If they finish with the same regular season record as they did last year, or even if it's a game worse, a game better, I don't think that matters. I think when we talk about this team, when we are going to be telling the story of this team, it's going to be all about what happens in the playoffs. It's going to be how far does this team advance in the postseason? What type of teams do they beat in the postseason? We saw 2 years ago, they lost in 5 games in the first round. The regular season was a success. That postseason was a failure. We saw this past year. The regular season didn't matter as much. Now, the Cavs dealt with a ton of injuries. I thought they did a great job overcoming those injuries. They finished a few games short of what they were in the first regular season with Donovan Mitchell here in Cleveland, but they had a much better playoff performance. They won a first-round series for the first time without LeBron James on the roster in my life, and I'm 31 years old. So that is something that can be viewed as a success. But let's say they lose in 5 games of the Eastern Conference semifinals next spring. I don't know that you can call that a successful season. I think internally, the Cavs should have standards. They should have goals of being a championship caliber team. Now, I also think it's foolish to say if this team doesn't win the NBA title this year, it was a failure. I don't believe that to be true. I don't think you should believe that to be true. But I also think it's difficult for me to say if the Cleveland Cavaliers make the conference semifinals next year, it's a success. It's difficult for me to get there. I understand the Eastern Conference is loaded right now. There's a lot of really good talent. There's a lot of really good teams at the top of the Eastern Conference. You've got Boston, who's not going anywhere. You've got New York, who I think made some really smart moves this offseason. I question their depth, I question their size, but I think they've got a lot on the wing, and I think they have guys that can give Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland fits defensively. You've got Philadelphia, and if they're healthy, which is a gigantic if, considering who 2 of their 3 best players are in Paul George and Joel Embiid, but if they're all healthy and playing their best basketball at the right time, They could be a team that I can see absolutely winning the conference. They could be a team that wins the finals. They're that good. You've got Milwaukee, who I'm not a big believer in, but they've got championship pedigree. They have a lot of guys on that team that have won a title. I have to imagine year 2 of Damian Lillard in Milwaukee going to be a lot better than year 1 of Damian Lillard in Milwaukee was. I have to imagine they're not going to be replacing a coach again in the middle of the season. Now, I question a lot with the injury. Chris Middleton having surgery on both of his ankles this summer doesn't exactly give me a ton of hope if I'm a Bucks fan, but you can't write them off. I think the Cavs are in the same group as those teams. So ask yourself, if you were a fan of the Knicks, and I'm not even going to include the Celtics in this because I think their standard is championship or bust. But if you're a fan of the Knicks, if you're a fan of the Sixers, if you're a fan of the Bucks, who I understand the Bucks have not won a playoff series in a couple of years. If you're a fan of one of those teams and that team is healthy and does not make it out of the second round, would that be considered a success? I don't think so. I think those are the teams that the Cavs should be comparing themselves to. So if it's not a success for those teams, I'm not sure how it could be a success for the Cavs. I think that this year, to be considered successful, the Cavs need to make the conference finals. What happens after that, if they win, if they lose, I still think you can be happy about the year. But if this is a team that, especially if that second round series, the conference semifinals, is a 5-game series or, maybe a not as quite competitive as you would hope 6-game series, I think it's going to be hard to look in the mirror and say this was an overwhelming success of a season. Now, there can still be things to be happy about. There will still obviously be things to be upset about. But I think that for this season, for the Cleveland Cavaliers to be labeled overwhelmingly successful, the Cavs need to win 2 playoff series. They need to take care of whoever they draw in the first round. I don't care who it is. And I do believe that this is a team that, if healthy, is built for some regular season success. I think they're a difficult team to prepare for. I think they're going to play hard. I think they're going to win a lot of regular season games. I believe that this is a team that will be surprising teams during the regular season. We're going to look up in February and go, wow, the Cavs are in second in the East. I think that's a very real possibility. I would not be surprised at all if the Cavs win 55 games and they're the 2 seed. I don't think that should surprise anybody. But what should matter the most about this season, about this team, is that they carry over that regular season success, which I expect, even if it might not come right away, even it might take some adjusting to playing for a new coach. As I mentioned, the roster has not changed, but the coach has. There's going to be an adjustment period there. Even if they don't get off to the fastest start, I still expect them to be really good. I expect them to be playing their best basketball at the right time, and I expect them to win 2 playoff series. Anything less than that, if you don't advance further, if you don't progress further than what it was last year, then I don't think you can look at the season and say, yeah, we're happy about that. That was a successful season. I think that becomes a really difficult thing to do. I think there needs to be significant growth. I think there needs to be significant progress in the postseason. Because in the last thing I will say about this before I get to a couple mailbag questions that I have. Donovan Mitchell is somebody that I view as a superstar in the league. Now, he's not top tier. I don't put him alongside Luka Doncic. I don't put him alongside guys that are like Nikola Jokic, even Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I don't think he's quite that tier, but I think he's that next tier. I don't believe there are very many players in the NBA that are better than Donovan Mitchell and have not made the conference finals. On that list of guys that you think are better than him or close to him or in the same tier as him, for the most part, they have all experienced more postseason success than Donovan. Donovan can do it. Donovan is capable of it. I expect it to happen this year. And if it does happen this year, we'll be talking about what a success it was. And I hope that's the case down the road. And I hope that the Cavs, when they get asked about what a successful season this year would be, I hope that they view it the same way. I hope that they have the standards that this is a team that should and can be good enough to at least be in the conference finals. And once you're there, it's kind of all gravy. Once you're there, you have to be happy. That's how I hope the Cavs view it. I'm very curious to find out if that's how they view it. I've got some mailbag questions that I want to dive into. I've got a few that I'm going to hit rapidly as we wrap up today's Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is a great place to go when you are searching for your daily fantasy fix. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app, and they've got over 5 million active members. That's a ton of active members, and for a number so big, you have to know Prize Picks is doing it well. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and then watch the winnings roll in. Like, for instance, 1 Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on Prize Picks every week in September. That's right, 1 yard. I know that Chicago, maybe not the best product on the field that we've seen. Might not have any wins yet, but I bet Caleb Williams is going to have at least 1 passing yard, right? That seems easy enough to me. So 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. That's 4 weeks of free wins. 4 weeks of free wins. If you haven't been taking advantage of that, now is the time to start taking advantage of that. Don't miss that deal on Prize Picks because it's gone once September ends. In September, you can look at the calendar. You got one more chance at it. So I would take advantage of that this weekend. And now you can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. That's like 4 correct picks, and you can win up to 100 times your prize money. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA and get $50 instantly when you play $5. It's code LOCKEDONNBA on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Seems pretty good to me. Prize Picks, run your game. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On NBA. It's filled with national and local experts talking about the league as a whole. Media days are back. There's more than just the Cavs that you're going to want to hear about. So as soon as this segment is done, go check out Locked On NBA for the latest national news, analysis, and entertainment from a great team of NBA personalities. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I've got a couple of mailbag questions that I want to get to, and I want to start with Vinny Gates here. Vinny asks, what is your ideal rotation for opening night? So I do think it's very interesting to kind of wonder, and this is another thing that I will be interested to ask Kenny Atkinson. I don't think that this is a media day question. I think this is probably a, hey, training camp is almost over. What does your ideal rotation size look like question? But I would be very surprised if the starting lineup changes at all from last year. Ideal starting lineup. So you're going to have, obviously, Donovan Mitchell, obviously Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen, and I would bet Max Strus continues to be the starting small forward. That makes the most sense to me. Now, you're looking at guys to come off the bench. How deep do you want to go off the bench? Well, Karis LeVert's going to play. He is too good not to play. I think he fills a really good role. I think Dean Wade's going to play. So now you're at 7. Isaac Okoro, George Niang, you're at 9 right there. How many more can you play? Do you want to play a third big? Does it make sense to give Tristan Thompson some minutes? I think that might be a matchup dependent thing. I think Sam Merrill deserves to have minutes. He should. They don't have anyone else that really can replicate him as a shooter. Like he has a skill on this team that very few people can, where he can just come in cold off the bench and really light it up from outside. So he deserves minutes. That puts you at 10. If you want to play a third big in Tristan Thompson, that's 11. So then you're missing out on Ty Jerome not getting minutes, Craig Porter Jr. not getting minutes, but there are nights you will need a third true point guard out there. So I think it's a really tough question to answer. I would like to see what this team looks like under Kenny Atkinson. And I think this is going to go along with, too, how many minutes are starters playing? Donovan Mitchell's been playing like 35, 36 minutes a night the last couple of years in Cleveland. If that number's down to like 32 or 33, I think it opens things up to potentially play, more guys to where you can get to 11 guys. But thank you very much for the question, Vinny. Up next, This comes from Gossman2814. Should we expect to see an even bigger leap from Evan Mobley? Do they need a leap to win it all? They do. I think if this team wants to get to where they want to get to, particularly in the postseason, they need Evan Mobley to become more of a force offensively. Defensively, he does not need to get any better. Now, it's great if he does, but he doesn't need to get any better. Like, Evan Mobley right now is an elite defensive player. If he does not improve 1% the rest of his career, just stays level, that's fine. That's awesome. You're thrilled with that. But offensively, he needs to keep improving. I do think that leap needs to come. I think it either needs to be as a facilitator, as somebody who's creating for others, and himself with the basketball in his hands, or as a spacer. So I think that we're either going to see him more on ball or attempting more three-point shots this year. I think that those are really the two outcomes that you can look at and say, okay, that's where the leap for Evan Mobley comes from. I think those are the things that make sense. But thank you very much for the question. One last one. This one comes from Reddit. JR Swish is the GOAT. I love that username. Big JR Swish fan. Thrilled that I got to cover him a little bit in Cleveland, but I absolutely have always loved his game. I think the Cavs could use somebody just a little bit like him right now. Seems like the Cavs want to keep the core four moving forward. Obviously, they do as of right now. What guys do you think the Cavs might target prior to the trade deadline that makes sense fit-wise and contract-wise? So one of the things to think about here is I don't believe, and I guess this could have been one of my questions for Koby Altman, but I don't believe that they want to be a team that is in the tax this year. I would guess that they want to shed some salary, not because they're cheap. They're not cheap. This is an organization that, when it dictates it, are willing to pay the tax. In fact, they're pretty locked in to paying the tax the next several years because of the extensions that they have handed out to Donovan Mitchell and Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley. But in the NBA, there is the repeater clock, and you have to pay extra tax when you are in it for so many years consecutively. I think it makes a lot of sense for the Cavs to try and get out of the tax this year, because they will be in the tax next year, they will be in the year after that, and it's going to get more expensive quicker if they don't duck the tax this year. So I think you might be looking at shedding some salary. One of the trades that I brought up in an earlier edition of Locked on Cavs was Karis LeVert for Larry Nance Jr. Now, I don't think the Hawks want to be in the tax either, so I think that's where things get sort of complicated with this deal, but I think he is somebody that makes sense. Larry Nance Jr. as a third big could make sense. I think another potential trade target could be someone like Harrison Barnes. He's in San Antonio right now. I'd be surprised if he's in San Antonio at the end of this season. I think he makes great sense because he's a fit for what the Cavs need roster-wise. They need depth on the wing badly. Now, if Jalen Tyson develops at the rate the Cavs hope he develops, then I think it changes things just a little bit. Maybe you don't need to go make that move because you've got another playable wing. But I think that's somebody that does make sense. So thank you very much for that question. Thank you for making Locked on Cavs your first listen today and every day. I'm hoping to have a bonus episode after Koby Altman and Kenny Atkinson speak. We'll have an episode on Monday. Hopefully we'll have 2 episodes on Monday, with it being Media Day, one before Media Day. I might do a similar one to this where I come up with questions that I very badly want to hear the answers from the players. So that might be something that I do Monday before Media Day, and then afterwards I might have another recap, and then it's off to training camp. Basketball is back. Let's all rejoice. We've got basketball to talk about. I cannot wait to actually start talking real basketball with you all right here on Locked on Cavs. So make sure to subscribe, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Check us out on YouTube as well. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you for making Locked on Cavs your first listen.